What's up, everybody? This is Andrew Krause again from Music Theory Logic. Today's going to be another music theory breakdown, and today it's none other than Justin Bieber's most recent hit with Chance the Rapper, the song Holy. So let's get after it. All right, here we are in Logic Pro. This is my recreation of the instrumental. If you've seen these before, I don't play the original audio. This is just my recreation. Again, my goal with these is not to sonically recreate the mix because that would be a waste of time since I don't own the rights to the song to begin with. But rather, my goal is to chart out all the notes to be able to show you the music theory. Cool. So I'll play you my track. I'm going to start it a little bit later since we don't have the vocals. The intro is somewhat repetitive. Let's take a listen. Nice. So this would be our first verse. And here comes the hook. Comes the 4 on the floor. My personal favorite. Alright, here comes Chance the Rapper. This part's the same as the first verse, but we start to get some cool breakups here. A little empty without the words, but check it out. All right, here comes what would be the small sort of hook section. This is our final big hook going to the outro. Cool. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you can recognize that song. If you're not familiar with the original, before we continue, I suggest you go listen to the original so you're sure you want to know about the music theory used. But let's talk about the theory. So this song is in the key of F sharp major. Now, this is an example of a song that for a lot of guitar players, like me personally, before I learned all this theory stuff, when I look at the chord progression like this, F sharp major, going to C sharp major, then D sharp minor 7, B major, I would have no idea really what harmonically was going on there. And it turns out that this is actually one of the most common and simple chord progressions known to popular music. It is a 1-5-6-4 chord progression in the key of F sharp major. Notably, like Girls Like You by Maroon 5 or Let It Be by the Beatles, No Woman No Cry, Bob Marley, Take On Me, Aha, like all these songs that use basically that same harmonic motion. But like I've said in the former videos, that's not to say that the song isn't like innovative or new or doesn't offer anything cool. The chord progression is only a small piece of what the ultimate song is. So let's look at the scale. So one of the coolest things about being in a computer is that if you forget your major scale formula, you could just draw a C major scale. That is like all the white keys from C to C. As long as you remember that, you could drag that first note to F sharp. That's going to then show you the different accidentals or notes in our key. Sounds exactly like C major if we were to play this. It's just starting on F sharp. Nice. Now, when we say accidentals in music, we're talking about the black keys. So you'll notice that this scale actually has every single black key possible and just 2 white keys. F natural, which we're actually going to call E sharp. The reason we call that E sharp is we have this rule in music theory when we're talking about a scale, we need one of every letter. That is a full 7 tone scale. So you will call this E sharp, even though that note is F. Reason is so that we don't have F and F sharp in one key. That'll make more sense the further you get into music. Cool. Then the chords that we have, like I said, it's a 1-5-6-4. That means that the chords are built on the first note, the first note, the fifth note, the sixth note, and the fourth note. The notes of those chords are made by skipping scale tones. So on the 1, I have the first note from the scale, the third, the fifth. All right, that gives me the notes F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. Going up to the 5th, which is F sharp, we have F sharp, E sharp, remember that note F, and G sharp. Again, these, if we were to just continue the scale, all of these notes are just from skipping the notes from our main key, F sharp major. Cool. So then for the minor 7th, this D sharp minor 7th, all that's happening there is that we're, instead of doing a triad, a 3-note chord, we're doing a 4-note chord. And that chord is in the key, meaning the minor 7th up here, that C sharp, is in our scale. So we're not playing any notes that are out of key. Cool. Let's look at the actual chord voicings. So chord progression is like the motion, what chord is actually happening. Voicing is where the chords are. Now, certain things, like about this voicing, having our top note be the A sharp going to C sharp, the C sharp down to F sharp. That's the main sort of melody our ears hear in the beginning. So that would be an example, the importance of the voicing. Also, this bass line, this next chord, the second chord here, is a C sharp major chord. However, we notice we don't have a C sharp in the bass. Instead, we have that, again, E sharp, F. We have the second note from the chord. So we would say that this chord is actually inverted. So why would somebody invert it? Well, one of the reasons is to make this bass line. See how it's just descending? If we were to go to C sharp instead, it would be here. So it would actually sound more like that 1-5-6-4 that it is. Cool. Then the rhythmic motif. So instead of these chords happening on steady half notes, which would be here, it's happening an 8th note before. The rhythms that we would say, that's a dotted quarter. In other words, 6 boxes of 16th note grid. And then that dotted quarter note is tied to an 8th note. That takes up that. And that dotted quarter note is followed by an 8th note, which is tied to a half note, which covers this. That's how we would write it in standard notation. But I know most of you are just working in DAWs, digital audio workstations. So that's what it's going to look like. Again, at a 16th note grid that we are at. Cool. Then that rhythm of where those chords change happen for the second two chords as well. So that really helps to make it sound more consistent. If I were to move this to a quarter, to a half note, it's going to sound really strange. It doesn't have the same movement where your ear, when you hear the chord right there, you're almost instantly expecting to find it there. Cool. So that talks about our piano. Now, the piano changes quite a bit in the song. We start to get some melodies. We get some fills, like, for instance, adding the note B on our way at the very end. All right. So just basically the same chord progression, but adding a B on our way to a B chord. That gives us this melody. C sharp, B, F sharp. Cool. Then one of the big like tags before the hook is that D sharp minor 7th, doing this sort of stutter rhythm, followed by this melody. Again, all those notes are from our F sharp major key. Cool. So let's talk about some of the other stuff. Let's go to the tambourine. So the tambourine's doing one of two things. It's either doing a standard backbeat on the 2 and the 4, or it's doing swung 16th notes. If you're in, again, any of these DAWs, you can draw out straight 16th notes and then use your quantize function to drag the swing over. If you do that and you're in Logic Pro, I have a swing of 82 happening. To my ear, that sounded close to the original song. Then the bass line. Each of these notes is following the bass line that was happening with the piano. We are adding rhythm, which really works well with our drum pattern. Gives the song some cool, like, different attack. And then at the end, we get this fill, which is 16th notes. We should actually make sure that those are swung out too. They are, because typically with any groove, like if I grab these, I'm going to want to make sure they're on an 82 swing too. With most grooves, if the guitar player or the drummer is playing with swing, the other musicians, if we're talking about live music, which is where all this stuff has its origins, before computers, human beings would play music together. And if a drummer is playing with a swing, then the guitar player, the whole band, is going to try to mimic that swing in their phrases. That's what makes them sound like they're playing as a tight unit of a tight unit, a band, group of musicians. And when we're producing music in the computer or making music on our own, all of the stuff that would be true about a band with grooves and stuff like that, we want to do in our electronic compositions, because again, that's where it all started, and that's kind of how music works for people. Cool. The drum pattern is basically so it's got a 2 measure phrase. So the second measure is basically a repeating of this. We basically have a standard backbeat, so the snare is on 2 and 4 each time. However, the first measure, we get this like extra fill snare that's on the second 16th note. And you can kind of hear right here how that we put the swing on that bass, how that really like works together, and it's like feels more like danceable as opposed to them being slightly out of time. Cool. And then past that, we've got a pretty active kick drum. One thing that works because there's not a lot of other stuff happening. When we have the drum beat going on here in the verse, we just have the bass and the tambourine. In other words, there's no more piano there, so there's a lot of room. It also, it just works to like add more action there, so it's not boring or anything like that. So keep that in mind when you're producing, sort of like how much stuff you have going on with the other instruments can dictate, how much room you have to do crazy stuff. And not that you can't make music where everything's going crazy, but most of the time that sounds like a mess to most people. But again, to each their own. Ultimately, we can only know what we each like for music. Now, my favorite part of the whole song is this sort of first bridge where we go from the same hip hop, sort of like swinging out groove into straight up just 4 on the floor kick drums. Now, both these are relatively simple, but it's not super common to have them actually together in the same song. So that's a super cool. It works really well. I think it gives it a lot of cool energy. The 4 on the floor continues. And then right before Chance the Rapper's verse or long verse section, we get an organ and sort of a string pad. It's really subtle right here. Sort of like lifting the music up so that when Chance comes in, it works, and you can all probably hear him say, Chance the Rapper. Did a bad job at that, but gosh, much love to Chance the Rapper. His verse, and it's incredibly well done, and this whole song is somewhat unique in that, like, typically a rapper verse would function more as just like a straight up 16 in the place of another verse, and he gets more like 24 bars, I think, 16 plus 8. Yeah, it's really interesting. And then it's also cool how they basically at certain sections, like in the second half of his verse, the same stuff is all happening with the tambourine, the bass, the drums, but it's just all taken out. It's really like unexpected, and it creates a cool move point in the song that's pretty memorable. So I like that touch. And then outside of Chance's verse, when we come back to the small hook, it's basically the same piano section, but it all goes up an octave. That's important. And there's also no like left hand of the piano, no bass line. I guess this sort of becomes the left hand because we get a new higher melody. This is just a doubling up of the first third of the chord, like the notes that are already played down there. And then we're going up from the 3 up to the 5 to the major 6. And then again, we sort of hear the melody as the top notes. And again, that goes back into chord voicing, and that's somewhat important. Cool. The last thing that I haven't mentioned is that if you are doing this with a MIDI controller, or you're doing it with like MIDI engines in a computer, it's super helpful to draw in sustain pedal. Pretty much any pianist, if they're going to play a chord progression like this, is going to use the sustain pedal. And another thing that the sustain pedal will help to do is smooth out the texture. You'll also notice that all of these little blocks look like different colors, aside from this, which I obviously drew in. That happens when a human being plays a chord progression. If you are drawing in the MIDI, you can do things like randomize the MIDI, or just change slightly where they hit and the velocities. That's going to mimic more of like hands on keys, which helps. And finally, that's really it. We've got, the intro straight into a hook, which is really common currently, getting the hook in the beginning. Then we get Justin Bieber's verse. Then we get the hook, that 4 on the floor bridge I love, Chance the Rapper, the small chorus, and then finally the big chorus in the key of F sharp major. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully you're got a lot of ideas on how to use scales and chords in the context of your music, and perhaps this helps you to go back and look at songs that you wrote by ear and better understand how you could add some like other stuff, or if you were to write a solo in MIDI, what notes you'd probably choose. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, I'd love to hear from you. I'll give my email below. Again, I wrote this textbook, Music Theory for Electronic Producers. It's filled with activities that will help you to better recreate songs or understand music theory on your own. I will link to that below. And if you're curious about what kind of music I make outside of these tutorials, I'll also link to that. As always, thanks for hanging out with me. Till next time, happy producing, people.